Good morning, YouTube America. We've been running a series on world building as a GM. One of the things that I always try to consider when I put together an area or region that my characters are going to be operating in is racial dynamics. And what I mean by that is that it's it's a common mistake of newer GMs to not thoroughly think out how different species or groups of intelligent monsters, if you will, or people will interact. Placing a goblin village within half a mile of a dwarven citadel is, well, redundant and doesn't make a whole lot of sense because, let's be honest, those dwarves generally dislike goblins with a passion. They're not going to tolerate having them for neighbors. Now, it's possible that you could have some dynamics, or in your world, the belief system or interaction system is altered so that the dwarves and the goblins can interact with the economic or at least moderately peaceful, leave them be mindset. But generally speaking, if you follow the base concepts of the characters or the monster entries, that's generally not accepted. The same would go for having elves having a community too close to, say, humans, for example. Within a mile or two, it's not likely to happen. It's unless it's a rare trading kind of arrangement. They don't get along on the base level of how they choose to live. And as a GM, it's something to try to keep in mind. It's like having one of these dungeons where you go in and you just randomly, the GMs randomly filled it with monsters and critters and what have yous, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. You having beholders and dragons and goblins and barbarians all occupying the same multi-level dungeon, uh, that's generally a mistake in my opinion. There's no theme, and that's kind of important if you want to have a continuity to it. If it's just one of these, we're in it for the bash and the hash thing, then that's acceptable. You're not really looking for kind of a theme or a continuity. Whenever I designed a world of sorts, I want these people to have, or these creatures to have their own ranges, their own areas, their own interactions, and those areas where they butt up against other groups, that's the areas of contention, and they're most likely places where your adventuring group is going to encounter these people. Actively going after a goblin tribe in on its own turf uh, may or may not be a good idea. I think a lot of GMs, especially new ones, don't expand on the full potential of their adversaries or their monstrous encounters, if you will. At least not to the degree that I think is you know possible. I believe that's a subject for another video. When we talk about dynamics of the friendly groups alone, humans are fast-moving, expansionist, live for today because tomorrow we're going to die. Because in the age group category, they don't live that long. And if you look at the medieval mindset of the common fantasy world, uh, their lifespan is very short. Most average humans, peasant, if you will, isn't going to live past 40. The healthcare sucks, the food's bad, the environment's bad, living conditions is bad, their treatment by their landlords or the leadership of the neighborhood is questionable at best, as opposed to very refined and well advanced elves who live for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. The dwarves live to be quite old, and they have a dynamic society that is close knit and generally closed to the outside world. You're not going to see them building large communities near humans, or allowing humans to encroach on their territory without some sort of you know, conflict arising. This is because, like I said, humans in some aspects are a plague. You know, all you have to do is look at our own world and our own history to understand fully how that would work. So, having an elvish community living, you know, a bunch of wood elves living in a forest within a mile of a major city of thousands of humans or more is highly unlikely and amateurish, right? Now, a lot of times I've listened to GMs go, well, I don't want to talk about these having to travel. We're going to go 50 miles or 100 miles to get to this adventure and 50 miles to get back to town and on and on and on. You know, no offense to some people. I like that sort of thing. I always have. I think that's part of the game. The concepts are there. Even base Dungeons and Dragons has movement tables and consumption tables for a reason. It's like weight and carrying capacity. I don't think a lot of people exploit that to its fullest potential. I think a lot of people want to sidestep it because it's just what they deem as unnecessary or inconvenient mathematics that they have to deal with. How much food do I need to go somewhere? How long will it take me to get there? How much stuff can I carry on my pack, and how much stuff can my horse carry? Well, to me, that's part of adventure. That's part of the game dynamics. If I have a goal in mind where I want my adventurers to go take care of some bad dungeon guy or some evil wizard or something of this, some dragon in his lair, part of the adventure is the 3 weeks it takes for them to get there. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm going to have to plot out every single foot of the way and play out every day of the way. That's just not going to happen. I mean, that's at the same time, though, you can find a happy medium. One of my favorites is to, either if it's a short couple days, I'm going to plan a couple of counters each day. And some of those are random. You can just, at that point, you can take those random area or terrain lists that you find in the GM guide and other source books that's suitable for the mountainous terrain or the plains that they're traveling through, and just roll a random encounter and bang whatever. The other one is where you have some where you uh, purposely set them up. Uh, it's like a lot of the monsters. There's certain kinds of monsters that don't equate well to a hack and slash. They're not really meant to be used in a general encounter where they just jump on the bad guys or the players. The players kill them and then move on. Uh, One of my favorite ones to mess with people as players is a bogle. Now, I'm not sure if those of you familiar with bogles know that this is not a creature that's generally going to jump out in the middle of the daylight with a handful of his buddies with axes and try to attack your adventures on in the middle of the road. That's not how bogles work. You know, they're sneaky, they're conniving, they're backstabbers, and they're a bit vengeful. So having a lair nearby the road where he's pilfering things from passing, you know, parties is a good thing to do, in my opinion. So I have one set up, and your party comes in, camps for the night, and if the bogle's successful, the party wakes up the next day without knowing that the bogle's been there, except some of their stuff's missing. You know, it's a good opportunity to relieve a party of excess wealth or excess of weaponry or excess anything. It also allows for an opportunity for the party to get a little cheesed and be, of course, I've had to learn to be prepared for a party who wants to track this bogle down and get some payback. And that can lead to some interesting encounters. Now, for me, where the value of this is that I put the player characters are on a mission to go to a place to do something, and eventually they're going to come back along the same route. So if they don't deal with the bogle or they don't kill the bogle's still living in the neighborhood. So in a week or two in game time, when they come ambling back, licking their wounds or lugging their treasure back to town, the bogle's still there waiting for them. And they'll camp in the same general vicinity, and the bogle will make another run on them. I've had a couple of interesting campaigns over the years where the parties become obsessed with trying to deal with this pesky monster's creature, and they're frustrated that they can't quite get him, and gone out of their way to do some pretty elaborate traps and other things to protect themselves because they've run through this poor bastard, this poor guy's area of choice on numerous occasions. Now, that's just an example. So when we talk about putting up the dynamics for world building on the larger map, it makes sense to put some reasonable distance between large groups of races. This is because that's how it would work. I mean, one of the things we mistake, I think, as GMs is looking at the human dynamic as this is how everybody would work. And truth is, that's not how it works. Not in this kind of situation. Humans would dominate the world at some point, and that's inevitable unless otherwise. So when you talk about in Lord of the Rings, they talk about Smaug and the desolation of Smaug. Well, it's a desolation for a reason. Even though the dragon's been sleeping for a better part of the last 100 years, nobody in their right mind is building a new village or a town within 100 miles of himself, because they're going to know that dragon's going to come at some point, and everything they do is wasted. The argument that Lake Town's close to the dragon is viable, but that's because in part the Lake Town people were arrogant. Humans are arrogant. They believe that the lake and their particular construction would allow them to survive, and it didn't. Their first town is in ruins. Everybody knows that. That's also typical of humans. We have short learned lived attention spans. So, well, if it happened before, we'll rebuild, and it won't happen to us. And that's the way it works. On the other hand, the elves have a little bit longer. They either eliminate the damn dragon, do their best to anyway, or pack up and move. Straight up. That's just the way it is. We're going to live with a dragon in the neighborhood. Not going to happen. So, keep that in mind when you're building your world, because it's to me it makes more sense to do this sort of thing, put this stuff around and not put this stuff out there the way it ought to, just where we jumble it together and there's no rhyme or reason to how we're laying it or populating our world, if you will. I look at the monsters and the animals in the same way, which is something that on a sidebar there, you're dealing with encounters, especially random encounters of movement from one place to another. 50% or better should be just wild animals, in my opinion, or odd things. I've stymied a few players occasionally when an encounter turned out to be an irate squirrel or a fidgety rabbit, and had the whole party up and running around trying to figure out what was trying to get them when they couldn't, when the walnut come flying out of the tree and hit somebody on the head. So it can allow for a bit of levity there if you don't overdo it. Or the opportunity for if somebody to snag a familiar, if they can encourage the squirrel to jump on the bandwagon, so to speak. There's all that to me equates to an encounter, which equates to experience. So even if it's humorous, even if it doesn't pan out with a bunch of blood and gore or a bunch of treasure, every opportunity to have an encounter or to utilize the skill set that generates experience. I think a lot of GMs, especially, and I've seen older, wiser GMs do the same thing. They overlook that opportunity. I was recently watching a video discussing things with somebody else about how to handle experience, how to give it so you move the groups along at a decent speed without, maxing out fast, or dragging your feet so you're minimizing too much. I think, in my personal opinion, and I've said this before, uh, an average group player should jump a level about one every other, session. Now, there are times where that moves faster, especially at the lower levels, because there's experience gains quicker. But at the higher levels, I think for a good dynamic, you want to level up every couple turns or every couple of game sessions. Uh, Now, it depends on what your goal is. You're looking at a year-long campaign, then maybe not so fast, but it is what it is. That's kind of the whole dynamic for the players, is developing their character and becoming more better at what they do and gaining more abilities and skills and perks and so on. And that's good. Uh, it's just like working with, like I said, working with populating your area, keeping in mind that there's a lot of complex and complicated dynamics involved here that doesn't have to be great detail, but a lot of common sense should be applied here. Making your map and keeping in mind that some communities don't cram well together, and you don't really want that either. So, do what you do, but make sure you enjoy what you're doing, and keep in mind that we're creating a world adventure, and the reality is we might want to use this world more than once. So, making it viable and flexible is always a desired thing. Y'all have a good day, man.